Welcome back to another Esports Weekly Roundtable. I'm Kevin Naki, joined alongside by Alex Goldenboy Mendez, and today we're going to be talking about money in esports. Esports is big business now. We just concluded two major finals over the weekend in CSGO and League of Legends. We have close to $1 billion a year that's being poured into this industry, and that is being expected by everyone to vastly increase over the next few years. Where is this money going, though, and how does esports need to react? So we're joined by two very special guests on the show. First off, we have Steven Aronset, who is the co-owner of Team Liquid. How are you doing today, man?
I'm doing great. Thanks for asking.
Awesome. And then we also have longtime owner of Complexity, Jason Lake. How are you doing, man?
Doing fantastic. Thanks for having me.
Cool. So let's go ahead and get right to it then. We had major finals over the weekend. Esports is bigger business than ever. More people are tuning in on a regular basis, not just for one game, but multiple. So let's start with a good old softball question to begin things. How did you enjoy the League of Legends finals? Do you like this system? Do you think that the LCS system that's set up right now approximates what we should have for most esports in the form of tournament structures right now? Or do you think that it's game dependent?
That's a big question.
It's like 6 parts.
Really not a softball.
Part 3A of
It's like you're just throwing a hard ball.
Well, you just don't know what's coming up next then. So, but anyway, yes.
No, I think League of Legends and LCS in general, the 5 years that I've been in LCS, living in gaming houses, working with the guys, I've contracted over 90 players in 5 years. I actually played in the tournament where we had people right behind me, like touching my ear while I was playing the game, right? Compared to being on stage, different international locations. Mm-hmm. I mean, the production value is top notch. You can't argue that. Right. You can't argue that it's an enjoyable experience. It's a great spectator quality. All the emotions that you get from like watching a soccer game or a baseball game, and the adrenaline and all this, the sports emotion side of it. Mm-hmm. Like you get that from watching an esports event. So in terms of that, I'm super happy about it. I think it did a great job, and I think production is increasing. And I think we just need to think a little bit more about the format. I think there's some improvements to be made there, but overall it was a great event for me. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Do you think that it was representative that we actually found the best team in the world from that? You mentioned format a little bit. What sort of changes would you like to see?
I think with regards to format, I think there needs to be a little bit more consideration for what teams come from what regions and how many teams come from what regions. I think that's something. And I also think that, at least for me in particular, I get a lot of enjoyment watching the group stage. Because in the group stage, you're seeing a lot of these different regions play off against each other, and you don't want to get to a point in the tournament where you're like, okay, it's just maybe 2 Korean teams battling it out in the finals, right? That kind of is a little bit it's not as exciting as seeing the regions battle it out. That's the whole international appeal to it. So for me, I mean, I like the more group play. I think going to maybe like a US Open kind of model, or more of a tennis model where you have lots of matches going on simultaneously. Maybe there's different broadcasts. Teams are getting awarded different points. I like that structure a little bit more than just kind of the current structure where it is now, where they have with League.
Yeah,
that's just personal opinion, though.
Steve's definitely the resident League expert, much more than I am. We've been in the LCS twice and got relegated twice, so that's kind of the rolling snake eyes. But just speaking in the greater picture of esports history, I think Riot really came along at a great time for esports, because esports globally after CGS, is kind of on its dying breath. You see the movie where the guy's lying there dying, somebody else comes up with this really long needle and stabs him in the chest and pumps him full of adrenaline and saves the day. Well, that was kind of Riot Games to global esports, quite frankly. They were kind of that adrenaline shot to the heart that really spread out through all of esports, and it has us where we are right now and on the verge of greatness.
Before we jump directly into money and revenue, then, let's take one last question here about tournament structures. Do you believe that there is any perfect tournament structure? You guys run organizations that obviously have teams across multiple different games. Do you think that a standardization of league formats would help? Or, much like conventional sports, is this something where you have to have a different format for each game because of the way that they're played?
For me, I think it all comes down to creating the most enjoyable experience for the fans that are watching. And I think there's no way to have a format that crosses all game genres that is going to be appealing, because just the type of personality from FPS to MOBA, I mean, they're not the same kind of gamers, right? And then they come from playing different kinds of games. So you can't have a format that's across the board. That just won't work because it doesn't appeal to the fans. And so I think that will be figured out as games run more and more tournaments, and then it'll just evolve. It'll be a version 20 of whatever it might be.
I just want to also say something though, like as much as I think like, seasonal structures are cool and, we're starting to see like more content without a doubt. There, people could watch, competitive Counter-Strike, League of Legends, whatever, right, on a regular basis. I would say things have gotten awfully complicated. Just like when someone tried to explain to me the League of Legends like relegation system, and I was just kind of blown away by it. I was like, man, so kids are expected to follow this format, like kids, right? Like 15-year-old, 16-year-old, sure, they may watch football or whatever, but the formats in that is just so cut and dry, right? Mm-hmm. It's a season, they play, the same teams play next year, right? In the interest of fairness and creating more opportunities for teams in esports, relegation came into play. Yeah, personally, for me, I would like more simplicity.
I've always been a fan of traditional sports-style circuits. I definitely agree with you, Stephen, when you say that like there's not a one-size-fits-all for every game. But I do think we can have a little bit more standardization. Right now, you have leagues that are just arbitrary events that are held every couple of months if a third party wants to run them. Some games are big enough that they can justify world championships, like we're seeing with the upcoming COD and Halo and what we already see in LCS. But I would argue that maybe we need a bit more standardization there. Let's change gears and let's start talking about real money. So there was a study that came out from Super Data Research that said roughly 81% of all revenue coming into esports right now is sponsorship based, and it's led a lot of people to ask, is this something that's sustainable for the industry overall? So first I'll ask you guys, from your experience as team owners, is that about right? Does it seem about that like 80%, and I'm not looking for you guys to divulge your full financial figures or anything, but is sponsorship that heavy with what you guys do, and is that sustainable for esports?
I really just want to start out saying, in general, when it comes to the business of esports, I'm incredibly bullish. I've been doing this song and dance for 12 years, as they say, and I've never been more optimistic than I am right now. To answer your question more specifically, when it comes to kind of the mix of sponsorship versus other forms of revenue, that answer is going to be a little bit different for each organization. But I'm bullish on both sides. I'm bullish on the traditional sponsorship numbers that we're seeing, the new interest that's really coming off of Madison Avenue, companies that we're talking to that we couldn't even get our foot in the door just a couple of years ago. And I think that's incredibly exciting. But even more exciting to me, and I think Steve will probably agree, are new forms of revenue, at least in the team model, that are helping us expand our businesses. In-game sales with Valve that we were discussing before the show started, sticker sales, future revenue share with leagues, and we can discuss that a little bit later. But for the first time really in esports history, we're not going to be so forced to rely on sponsors. Is that always going to be a big chunk of our revenue? Absolutely. Of course. We're advertising at the end of the day like most major sports, right? But once you start going out into merchandising, revenue share, in-game digital sales, and other things, and start to spiderweb, that's when you get longevity in business, and that's what really excites me.
Mm-hmm. So there was recently a panel at GamesBeat where they were talking to a lot of investors about esports specifically, and many of them said, yeah, we do think that there's a potential in esports. It's in betting. They said that it was specifically quoted, we don't know if necessarily we want to invest in starting teams right now. We don't know about the franchise model, which we'll certainly get to in a bit, but they did say betting is the way to go. Is that the only major revenue stream that you see opening here for esports that investors can get involved in? Where else do you see places for them to get involved?
Absolutely not is the answer. So there's a couple different other areas of interest for marketers and advertisers and agencies that want to maybe like sponsor an esports team. One, it's sponsorships, it's advertising, it's market activations. Those are all different kinds of things. And in traditional sports, you may pay to get a logo on a jersey, right? You get impressions from the stream. That player is going to be playing in a tournament. That tournament's going to be broadcasted on network television or through digital media. So that's all understood, right? Mm-hmm. There's a new kind of medium, which is personal streaming for our athletes. They are out there turning their streams on. They're having an engaging experience through, let's say, the Twitch chat. They're able to market like no one has ever done before, right? And so if we can do the types of activations that have higher engagement than traditional ads that you see while sitting on the couch and watching television, or watching something on your phone, that those engagement numbers, one, they're not even being tracked to the degree that they should be. So the CPMs associated with esports and the content that we're producing is completely undervalued right now. Once they get up to the levels that other advertising and other content is generating, then you're going to see a lot of valuation increase for esports teams.
Is that a problem inherent to esports, or is that simply just the online advertising model that it doesn't seem like anyone's been able to crack yet, though?
No, the way that I see it is that advertising and spending money on advertising means that there needs to be the metrics in place in the reporting to know what you're spending, right? So if you buy click ads, or if you buy impressions or video plays, that's kind of understood. It's been around for a while. Nobody really understands this new kind of digital media format. We're trying to still figure it out. What happens when, I remember an activation that we did for Nissan once. We had Voyboy turn his stream on, and he was streaming to 50,000 people, and we crashed a website for Nissan. But we couldn't track any of it. It was like, what happened? It's like, well, we crashed your site. Like, okay, can't report on it.
And that's really the crucial evolution that Steve touched on. For years we were selling the passion, we were selling the mind share and the heart share, we were selling the demographic, which was so difficult to reach via traditional medium. But now, as we develop these new metrics, and there's some companies that are coming out that are delivering such products, now we can finally sit down, slap a piece of paper across the desk, and be like, here are the numbers. And every time traditional sponsors that haven't really engaged in our space see those numbers, see eyebrows go up, like for real? Like, really? And it's kind of like, yeah, we've been telling you this, but now people are developing, and I don't want to call it any specific developers and give them free advertising on your show, but I've seen some really intriguing products that are going to enable us to bring hard stats and hard numbers to the table, and I think that's going to make all the difference in the next year.
Yeah, definitely. I think as more non-endemic brands get in, we're going to start seeing that vastly start increasing. I mean, we're obviously proof of that here, but there's quite a bit more. Yeah, I know, right? Look around a little bit. So now, how does this money get spent, though? We have a lot of money that's coming in through esports. You guys sponsor a lot of different teams. Something that's actually been talked about in the past. On our very first episode, we had people come in and say that if a game succeeds, and you have a lot more revenue coming in for one particular team, for a lot of teams, that was League a few years ago, whenever that took off, that money doesn't necessarily get invested back into that League division. It can oftentimes get invested back into a different game, or what is the next upcoming game, or how are you going to support more aspects of the of your operation. So how do you guys split the difference between ensuring that when a player gets popular, they're fairly taken care of, they're fairly compensated, and also expanding and growing the rest of your business at the same time?
And this argument's been used a lot. There's been a lot of discussion about a player union and how players are so overlooked and players are so neglected. And I'm not against player union in any stretch of the imagination, or association, I think would be a better word. If done right, the players do need to move that direction as the sport matures. But I think what you see more often is when money comes pouring in from a certain gaming title, people in our type of position start seeing those numbers, they start seeing the eyeballs, and it's kind of our job to move and gravitate towards that game. So the more demand for players, player salaries always go up. It's historically proven. If a game starts taking off, the player salaries take off. And why is that? It's because we're so damn competitive. People are saying, oh, the owners are getting rich and driving Ferraris and the players aren't making any money. We were talking before the show started. We have a bunch of gamers that make a lot more money than we do.
Yeah, absolutely.
And as the competition for these gamers increases and continues on this upward momentum, I mean, the gamers are going to get their piece of the pie. I'm not advocating against an association or whatever, but I see a lot of these comments on Reddit and other places where they're like, oh, the poor gamers, they're starving in their mom's basement. And that's simply not the case. If your game takes off and you're damn good at your game, the money's going to find you.
Mm-hmm. So let's expand on that. You said the magic words. You said Players Association, and we should talk about it at some point. If not, then to just talk about salaries. There have been team organizations that have been tentatively getting together to try and force demands upon certain tournaments and things like that. Where are we going with any sort of a regulating body, whether it's a Players Association, it sits over the top? What are your guys' predictions for that? Some people say it's an eventuality and it's just going to happen. Some people say, no, it has to happen right now. Where do you fall on that?
I want to see more regulation, and the sooner the better. I want to see more leadership amongst all the different industry players. So the players, the team owners, the developers, there needs to be more governance on how we run these tournaments, how players are treated, how tournaments should be run, just kind of minimum standards that we all find acceptable. To your earlier point, though, with regards to player salaries and trying to figure out how all of that works out. I mean, I want nothing more than players to make as much as possible. I think the tougher question that we haven't asked yet, maybe, is how do you discern the difference between sustainable versus non-sustainable, right? So in certain regions, if somebody wants to come in and just spend, let's say $100 million, and just what does that do? Well, can you run a $100 million business in esports in a profitable way if you're paying players $5 million a year? Mm-hmm. Can you do that? And that's non-sustainable versus a sustainable model. So that is, to me, I think, the tough part of figuring it out, because at least I can speak for TL. I mean, we do an amazing job on paying our players, and we always try to, and the market rates are like changing every week. It's like trying to figure out what they are, right? But as soon as a new big revenue source comes in, well, we got to siphon off a percentage for our players. That's the way we do things. But it's trying to compete with when it's not that, and it's not driven off of the revenue coming in, and it's off of outside investment.
And what he said about sustainability, I think, is really important to emphasize. I said earlier I'm very bullish on the financial future of esports, and I am, but I want to make a prediction about next year, 2016. 2016, in my personal opinion, is going to be the year of venture capitalists coming in on the team side. We've seen a lot of venture capitalists over the years, and most of it's kind of been in either like software or with the leagues themselves. Next year, you're going to start to see venture capitalists come in on the team side, and that is also going to benefit the players. But there's dangers. There's warning, Will Robinson going on here. When a flood of money comes into a space, that can create large bubbles, and it can create problems, because Joe Smith comes out of Hollywood, with $80 million and starts offering our gamers these huge salaries. It looks all great, and people are making money for a little while, but is it sustainable? History would prove in the business world it's not. And history would prove in the business world a flood of money, if not carefully managed and properly apportioned, can damage an industry. If we have a lot of new money coming into the space that doesn't care so much about gaming as they do capitalizing on the hot girl at the current prom type of situation, there's going to be a lot of problems. So while I am bullish, I'm trying to sound some alarm bells for people that care about such things and follow such things. Be very careful, because this flood of money can end up hurting esports and setting us back rather than pushing us forward.
So I did want to say something, right? One of the things I've noticed recently, recently Virtus Pro had like a huge investment set into them, which I thought was great for them, obviously. But one of my big concerns is, and Jason, you obviously know this, was like the CGS situation, right? And my big concern is there is this bubble, as you had mentioned, and I think that the bubble could eventually pop. And that's the thing that I'm so paranoid about, because having come from community and built my way up for years and years, the last thing I want to see is essentially greed ruin this amazing thing.
Players in particular that chase the big paychecks just for the money almost always get burned. You could go down through history of people chasing for a quick paycheck rather than kind of working with people they trust in the industry, people that have proven themselves to actually give a damn about the industry. Story after story after story, they chase this paycheck and bam, it's gone. The organization's gone. Usually they didn't get paid enough. And that sort of thing and that sort of storyline sets us back at a time where we should all be working together to really take it to the next level. Is VC a bad thing inherently? Absolutely not. But let's be very cognizant and very careful about who's getting that VC and how they're spending it in our kind of esports world, so that it doesn't blow up in all our faces.
Well, your predictions are already coming true. I mean, it was Crosscut Ventures who just announced they put in a big investment into Immortals that they just stood up. So we're going to see more of that next year. That's absolutely right. But you mentioned sustainability. If sustainability isn't just loads of trucks of money just being dumped on you, what does sustainability mean in esports? What is it to you? Is it just ensuring that we don't go through another bust period again and we always ensure a consistent growth? What does that mean?
Sustainability is driving revenue from the major sources of revenue that an esports team may generate. The biggest right now is sponsorships. The next potential opportunity is our participation agreement, equity position, rev share position, profit share position, whatever you want to call it, with the leagues that we operate in, and those will probably be the two, right? And then everything else will be maybe ticket sales, merchandising, and everything else. So it's how much revenue can you generate based on how many eyeballs are on your team, right? And if you push products and services to your fan base and they go out and buy things, and that creates an industry. That's a sustainable industry. We've done I think that we are being undervalued in terms of how much we can actually deliver. So there may be a bubble. I'm less thinking that there's a bubble. I think it depends on the numbers, right? If salaries go from where they are today, player salaries are our biggest expense. And if they go from where they are today to 10 times in 6 months, then I would say maybe there's a probability of a bubble. But
Sure.
if they go up, let's say 2 times, then maybe not, because we're undervaluing already what we can deliver to sponsors. So it's a math question for me.
Yeah, I mean, the bubble is created by a false sense of revenue. I mean, it's basic mathematics. It's economics 101 if you really want to get down to its core. You have to bring in enough money to pay your damn bills. And if you're just piling a giant chunk of VC on top of that to look like you have a lot of money, but you're really not paying your bills, that always is going to implode. I mean, that's been the history of many countries and businesses, for thousands of years. And VC can be kind of a little jet fuel in the turbo engine to take you to the next level, but it's intended to raise your revenues so that they exceed your expenses and you make money. But when people come in and start pouring it in, I'm going to pay these guys this and those guys this, it's not sustainable. And when that organization or group of organizations crashes, or the investor gets bored and moves on to his next pet project, all these esports people that really give a damn and pour their lives into it get burned. And that's what concerns me.
Yeah, and a lot of people have been. Oh, please go ahead.
I was just going to say, so, talking to you guys, definitely seem to have that thought in your head and you're cognizant of it, right? But I don't know if I feel that same way about other people, right? You know what I mean? And not like calling anyone out in particular, but just overall in general, right? It's and I think, it kind of just comes to education. And honestly, I would even argue things like this, right? Which hopefully an owner would watch and say, maybe we should be more careful about how we distribute our funds or how we actually accept funds from VCs. Because as you had mentioned before, right? Like a VC could just come in and say, oh yeah, I'm going to invest in this thing because it's cool and it's popping and this is a thing right now. And then 6 months later, you know what? It's kind of, I'm just going to pull out. All right. And then that's it. And that team that just put all their hopes and dreams into this thing just imploded. And I just really hope more people are cautious and, really just playing it close to the chest as opposed to just, buying the Lamborghinis and trying to date the supermodels and living life like a rock star. We'll get there, but I think with smart business, we'll get there.
Absolutely.
I shouldn't do that now?
I mean, I do it every day, but it's just
all right.
Kevin's got his Coke can and his Tesla sitting outside, so I don't know if
what are you talking about? One thing we haven't talked about, though, is the role of developers in all of this. We've talked about teams, we've talked about external money coming in. Developers have provided support on varying scales, obviously. You have one extreme, the LCS example, a very tightly regulated sports league that has rules that you have to follow or you're fined. Punishments can be levied against your team or organization. Then you have the Wild West in some games. What role of support or what amount of support do you think developers should provide for their titles? Is there a best example out there, or do you think that everyone still has a little bit to learn?
I think that developers should create a popular game, and if that game becomes a spectator sport and it starts to grow, then I think it is on their responsibility to provide some sort of governance and let that game grow in that spectator space. And I think some developers they're not sports company. They're not, they don't run venues and they don't have referees and rules and tournament stuff. That's not their business, right? But they kind of get brought into it. So some of them will do a great job by aligning with tournament organizers that will do a really good job of doing that on their behalf, or some will decide to do that in-house. And both are fine. All I care about is that as something is really popular and it's growing, there's a lot of viewership, and players are making a lot of money, and there's a lot of advertising dollars on the table, that there's some governance. They're taking care of their game. They're slapping wrists when they need to. They're saying, hey, no cheating in my game. Like, you guys are banned. There's been some cases even of developers that have been kind of hands off, getting involved when they need to. And so as long as they're doing that, then
I just want to say. So having, being from Twitch, right, we deal with a lot of developers all the time. And I know this is more for, you guys, but I just wanted to make this point clear, right? You mentioned a baseline, right? Like, what is like the thing that a developer has to do to make an esport, right, so to speak? And one of the pet peeves that I have is when a developer creates a game and does not create the appropriate tools for which the game can be broadcasted, right? And can be supported in multiple ways. And that's the thing, right? You need this ground level grassroots initiative. And you cannot get to Madison Square Garden without starting there. And a lot of people want to go from point A to point B, and they don't want to think about everything that's in between. So I would argue, and I hope, I wonder if you guys agree with me on this, I would argue that at the base of it, they have to be cognizant of the ground level, of the grassroots. And then at that point, you build upon the structure, and then eventually you get to Madison Square Garden and the supermodels and all that stuff, right? That's the dream, right? I'm bringing supermodels a lot into this conversation. You can clearly tell where my head is at.
Yes.
What are your guys' thoughts in regards to that, Jason? You did Call of Duty.
I totally agree with you, and I think it's a beautiful thing that developers finally woke up and realized the potential for having competition in their game. Like Kevin and I were talking before the show started, back in 2003, 4, 5. Like, we were begging Valve, like, please come in. Like, we've got something great going on here. We could really use your support to bolster it. And they just weren't interested. Now, obviously, it's completely different. But it's such a symbiotic, mutually beneficial relationship. Like, you put a little time and energy and money into this, and people are going to play your game longer. They're going to buy more things inside your game. You're going to make more money. And guess what? You get to release part 2 or part 3 or part 6 or whatever it is. And you've got this giant, inherent, built-in fan base ready to go, voraciously devour your game. I mean, any developer that builds a game that could even conceivably be an esport that doesn't put the basic tools in, like, it blows my mind. Perfect example off the top of my head is Titanfall. I played the heck out of Titanfall. I loved Titanfall. You're jumping in giant machines and squashing people. I mean, it was fantastic. When asked if they were going to be an esport, they said, no, we're not doing anything in that direction. Where's Titanfall now, really? Yeah. What could Titanfall have been if they had really kind of invested in esports and kind of tried to develop a community? Because there was a small grassroots contingent that was ready to play that game a little more competitively, but they weren't given that option. And then you've got games like Smite that built that grassroots and really focused and really cared about esports and the competitive side of their game, and their game's just continuing to go up.
Yeah, even Halo, right? The recent Halo, they put a little bit of effort into it, and now you have a $1.5 million prize pool. In 1 week, they raised $500,000.
Yeah.
Like, that's just absurd, right? And that's the beauty of crowdfunding, but that's just the effort that goes into it. And I think that a lot of people just, they look at it and they're like, dev resources, and like, I get it, right? Because I've dealt with so many developers who think like that. But at the end of the day, if this is a goal, if this is something you want, this is the baseline thing you have to do.
I think some of them are being taught that this is what they want as well. I mean, the most obstinate and obstructive company that I can think of lately has been Nintendo to the Smash crowd. I mean, Smash has been wanting support from Nintendo. They've been beating down the doors of Nintendo to try and get support. And finally, in like the last few weeks, they're like, right, we'll start sending reps out to events and things like that. We'll figure out what this esports thing is. But even companies that are outside of this are basically being forcibly told, no, you better pay attention, because the thing I think is most interesting about esports is that there's been a couple of studies that have been done that show that esports fans are not necessarily your high LTV user, your high long-term value users where you're going to get tons of money out of them, but they do become that whenever you do have esports, when you have this infrastructure, because those are the people that evangelize your game for you, because those are the people that go out and tell every one of their friends, I play this game 40 hours a week, I love it, you go play it too. They're starting to realize that there's very real value in that community.
Yeah, and speaking of Twitch, I spent a lot of time studying Twitch because I find it very intriguing. And you can watch a game that'll come out and be like the flavor of the week or even the flavor of the month, and it's shot up to #1 or #2 game on Twitch, and then it goes.
Yep.
And it's gone. With
Yep.
the competitive esports titles, you can go month after month, some year after year after year, and they're still getting free advertising for their game because people love it, and it's a competition, and it takes on a life and a loyalty of its own. And it's beyond me why any serious developer would not consider an esport. I mean, casual games and other things, in mobile games, a whole other topic, I can understand, but why wouldn't you want this free marketing to continue for years? Why wouldn't you want this engagement from your community and this excitement around a title? Then you create a legacy title, and, Halo just hit, I believe it was $5 billion in revenue for, the Halo series. And how much of that would not have been made without esports? Nobody really knows. But as you said before, if they can drive $500,000 in a couple of days just crowdfunding, there's a pretty big crowd that likes that game.
I mean, especially with the way that games are going nowadays, just in terms of distribution and payment models anyway. I mean, we've talked about games as a live service here many times. That's the platform that games are choosing. And I don't think that anyone has really accurately put a dollar sign against, like, what happens when Gragas is really popular at League of Legends and a bunch of people go buy Gragas. That is esports revenue, and we need to talk about that, but we don't really have a way to measure that yet, unfortunately.
Yeah, I think it's kind of like a broader problem that I know everyone, I hate to mention Twitch because I do not want it to be a part of this at all, but it is a broader problem that like everyone's trying to solve, right? Everyone's always trying to solve, even people with Twitch, developers, everyone, because I think everyone wants to figure out how to make this thing and then in turn take that and, as far as esports is concerned, and you're going to like this one, drive it back to the teams, right? Revenue for the teams. Look at that transition, baby. But that's essentially the way that I think of it, right? It's a vicious circle. It's a very vicious circle, but it's one that we have to take, and it's a necessary one. And over time, I think we're definitely going to get there.
In your opinion, is there any sort of moral imperative upon teams, organizations to be a screen for potentially young people for sensitive materials? There's been a lot of, let's call them adult sponsors that have come into the industry. We have YouPorn that's actually is directly sponsoring teams. That's been widely regarded by some as more of a marketing move than anything else. You have betting organizations that are starting to spring up everywhere. And we're not just talking about esports. I can't take 2 steps without seeing a stupid daily fantasy draft sign everywhere on the street. Is there any sort of moral imperative for teams to kind of screen these sorts of sponsors, or is that okay? Are we in the Wild West and we're making too big of a deal about this right now?
I mean, I can speak on behalf of TL. I mean, we always take a look at the sponsors that we align with. I mean, we can't control all of the companies and how they engage in this industry. To answer your broader question, yes, I think that there are some organizations that shouldn't be marketing to the type of demographic and the age that they are. I think that that's just not right. You mentioned betting, you mentioned fantasy. Those are, to me, 2 very different things. I love the concept of being able to build a fantasy team and win money off of that. I think that is super cool, and I'm engaged into this team and trading players and all that kind of stuff. That's very different than actually betting on a match. And pornography and alcohol and all these other kinds of things that there's been governance with network television to come up with rules on what kinds of advertising can happen at certain times during the day. It's just right now there's a lack of governance, and it's kind of more of the Wild West, so people are seizing that as opportunities to get involved in the space. So to answer your question, yes, there should absolutely be some sort of governing body that kind of says, look, you can't really run these kinds of ads. Right now, the people that are doing that are the folks that are distributing the content. So whether that's the channels like Twitch and YouTube, or if it's the tournament organizers or the teams, and they're hopefully doing a good job of maintaining that to some degree.
Sure. Specifically about betting organizations in fantasy, though, I'd like to talk about that. We recently had another match-fixing scandal in StarCraft 2 in Korea. That's a scene where it's very top-heavy at the moment. You're either making a lot or you're not really making enough, and so players are saying that it's more lucrative to go through these sort of brokers to do illegal gamblings. Then we also have on the other side of the spectrum, like you said, fantasy, which is pretty much a different beast altogether, but still does involve the concept of you wagering money on specific players and their performances being measured. Do you see any issue issues with fantasy at all being involved in sponsorships, either at the team player level, or do you think that there's some gray area there too?
I kind of agree with what Steve said. I view fantasy a little bit different personally. I do see where it could be a slippery slope for some people, but I don't equate that with like an outright bet, at least in my mind. And I think with any industry where there's competition, this sort of thing can arise. And like you said, you're not only seeing the betting and the fantasy in esports, it's exploding in our culture in a way that's never been seen before. Going back to your original question about a moral imperative, to protect our viewers and our younger fans, I personally believe that we do have such an obligation. Obviously, not everyone's going to agree by any stretch of the imagination. The question then becomes, what is that obligation? And esports teams say, could you be sponsored by a major beer company, or is that kind of crossing the line? Even though our demographic is now skewing 18 to 34,
sure.
The majority actually are legal drinkers, and we've been to the Twitch parties, and
There's
people like
What's
that.
going to happen?
Bar crafts.
People,
and
yeah,
things
there's
like
bar
that.
crafts.
Bar craft,
yeah.
There are obviously some younger fans, especially in certain games. So that question has to be asked and answered by each owner. When pornography comes in, I think that tends to be a little more clear-cut, at least for the average person.
I agree.
But without smacking anybody with a moralistic stick, I just think my opinion is it needs to be looked at. And if you want to have a quality organization that you want to build over time and be remembered for creating something solid and legendary, I don't think you want certain brands attached to that, and I don't think you want to wake up one night 20 years from now realizing that you were promoting these things to the younger generation.
Now, most industries are built on the people that work in them, and they have to attract top talent to make sure that the industry is successful and sustainable over time. Up to this point, largely, with some exceptions, you've not had that in esports. People in esports have had to take pay cuts, doing things on passion, doing things because they loved it and they believed in the scene. Are we at that point finally where we can pay the right people the right amount of money? The reason I say this is because just recently Activision announced that they were standing up an entire third company, and that this was going to be run by the former CEO of ESPN, Steve Bornstein. This is also going to have Mike Sepso, like we talked about before, the president co-founder of MLG. Are we at that point now? Do we have enough money in the scene where we can pay like the true top experts from the entertainment and sports industry to come in here? Or are we still working on passion right now?
I think we're very much there.
Yeah.
At the very end of your question, you kind of threw in the top experts or whatever, and I don't know if we can bring in Steven Spielberg, to put us together.
And I don't think we
For
need
sure,
to.
for
right?
sure,
Right?
for
I
sure.
think
We're
we have-
absolutely there, and it's fantastic. We were talking about this before the show too, where I know dozens of people that were volunteers. They were young guys just putting in their time over the years. Many of them volunteered for me because I couldn't afford to pay them. And now they're like VP of esports here, or like leading an esports division there, or something to do with game development. And they've taken this passion that they had and this time and dedication that they had and turned it into a real life career. So, we are already there. We've been there for some games, and I think it's only going to get, as they say, the future's only going to get brighter.
Yeah, absolutely. We have a good number of employees. We offer benefits. We're hiring. We have like 3 job apps on our site. We're running real companies.
That's great.
Yeah. So we do still have contractors that are doing freelance work, but that's every company. So it's
Of course, yeah, definitely. With more money coming in, though, generally you need a stable platform that people want to invest in. You need to make your organization attractive for people to actually give you money. And the topic that's been coming up a lot has been franchising for these organizations that have been around in multiple different games. What is your opinion on franchising? Do you think that teams will eventually achieve that in their various different games, or are we heading towards a different model?
I hope that, the term franchising versus, an equity position or some sort of profit share or revenue share, I'm not sure exactly what the right term is,
Yeah.
right, but let's just call it franchising. If certain leagues were to franchise with team owners, yes, that would provide a lot of security, and I think it is good for the ecosystem. I think it enables us to invest more in our players, because right now, yes, we have coaches and analysts, and we have gaming houses, and we have chefs, and we have nutritionists, and we have sports psychologists, and we have all these things that for the guys. But you know, like, is that going to be around in 6 months? You know, because are we going to have a position in the league? Are we going to be relegated out, or is there going to be a new team that comes in? You know, we would like to be able to invest knowing that this is going to be around for a while, so that players can come, and up-and-coming players that are smart, and we scout them, we can put them in and say, look, you just give us 6 months of your time under this management, and you will be the best CSGO player, or you'll be the best LCS player in North America.
Sure.
Like, that is something that I want to be able to do, but it's tough when you don't have the kind of security of the franchise agreement with the leagues that we participate in.
Well, my question is this, though. Sorry to interject, but one of the charms of what makes esports, and I know that a lot of people really want to chase this sports carrot, but one of the charms of it is the fact that Team Liquid had to start from somewhere, right, and had to start from the bottom and had to build its way up to where it is today. Same thing for Complexity, right, and franchising, if that's the term to use appropriately, could effectively shut that down, right? Could stop that up-and-coming team, that small group of guys that are super passionate about, esports and super passionate about their game. It could stop them from actually being something, because they'll end up losing their players at a certain point in time, or they'll get picked off by the big franchises. And that's a broader issue altogether, but I guess, I want to get your guys' thoughts on that. I mean, of course, for you guys, it's great. There's financial stability, right? There's no doubt about that. But personally, for me, I feel like it loses a little bit of the charm that makes esports. And feel free to agree or disagree. Obviously, this is something that deeply affects you.
No, I think you're absolutely right. And of course, when you have two team owners in here, you're going to get like our side of the story. And it's really good to have you to kind of balance it out. And I don't know that anyone has the exact answers here. But there needs to be more stability. If we're going to, say, invest, $1 million, $1.5 million into a gaming division, we have to know that we have a spot in something and we can't get relegated out. We've been investigating buying a LCS team that's currently for sale. And the numbers they're talking about, it's simply not viable to make that kind of investment unless you're buying something that has some tangible sustainability. And like I said before, we've been in the LCS twice, and we've bought out twice. It's like the biggest thorn in my ass in my whole career. But for sustainability in what we're trying to accomplish on the team and the league side, there needs to be some type of franchise system. I don't really like that word, but I understand what you mean by it. But I also completely understand what you're saying. This is a global activity that's very aspirational. How can we secure the correct safety measures, the correct protections for the players and the organizations, and provide some sustainability like an NFL, like an NBA, for fans to follow while maintaining the aspirational side of esports, where a kid can form a team in his garage and kind of come up and through. And that's the $1 million question, I guess. Well, but I would personally prefer some type of hybrid system. I think teams that have been around a long time and have paid their dues and have been in the scene and are proven deserve some stability in the league structure, where we don't have to worry about crashing and burning or relegating out, using LCS as an example. But there also needs to be some way for that one guy who's passionate, pours his life into it, to come up and play with us, right?
That's actually something I'm really passionate about, though. How do you develop the next generation of people once you move over to, and I guess we're calling it a franchise model here, but because in traditional sports, you have minor leagues, you have developmental leagues, you have college, even, for God's sake, that has very well-developed, regulated sports environments where people can start to learn skill and get notoriety and recognition. How do we develop, if we move to this rev share model, we put teams in place, we know they're going to be in the league year in and year out, how do we ensure that you can get those people to rise their ranks through the system then?
Mm-hmm.
It's a tough one.
Yeah, it's a tough question. There just needs to be enough owners that are investing into the development of their teams and players and providing the right structure, and they get to a certain point and there's a value that team, that brand, that group of players brings by joining the league, then the league should want that team to also participate. And that's when you go from having 10 teams in the league to 11 teams in the league, or you go to 12 teams in the league. It just makes sense to get this big
like expansion,
brand,
like NBA expansion.
right? Exactly. Like, it makes sense to get this team in the league because they just bring a lot of value, whether it's financial security, the way they treat their players, or they have an immense fan base, or whatever it might be. Then you just add more teams as it makes sense for the league. So I think just because the league maybe there is some sort of like franchising agreement with the league or a certain number of team owners, it doesn't mean that that's always going to be the way. Just that set amount. As the league continues to grow, there'll be more team owners for the folks that you're
I actually like the idea of like expansions, right? I think the only challenge there. So again, back to you guys is again. Jason, you mentioned it's a very aspirational business, and anyone can get involved, right? Like, I know that I cannot start an NFL team, right? Like, that will never happen in a million years. It's done, right? But esports is still very much that. And there are probably kids right now. I mean, every day I get a tweet from some kid who on his Twitter title says CEO of random something esports or CEO of something gaming. Everyone's a CEO now. You're not a CEO. Stop it. Anyway.
Wow.
No, you're an owner, and that's okay. Like you're not an executive. Anyway, moving forward though, I did. Not to be a douche, but I gotta call it like I see it. Anyway, but to that point though, despite the hilarity of that, those people are still there. They still exist. They want to become liquid. They want to become complexity. They want to have the legacy. And I do agree with your expansion model. I think about it. I'm like, man, you can. When the Raptors and the Grizzlies came into the NBA, that was a big deal. It was two teams, and you're only dealing with like a limited amount of of states or cities that you can join into for the NBA. But for esports, I feel like that number is just 150 times that, right?
Yeah.
Like, it's tough.
Well, the thing is that when just the pure definition of franchising, I mean, you think about popular franchises, right? And in order to get into the franchise, there's usually some sort of wherewithal or some sort of test that you meet certain standards before you become you start running the franchise. You have to have certain considerable financial assets. You have to prove that. You have to be accredited. You have to maybe meet some sort of moral checklist associated with how you've run business in the past. And you meet those things, and then you get into the franchise. So to your point, yes, there's a lot of people that want to run esports teams. Of the people that want to run esports teams that meet all of the litmus test areas that are important to being an esports owner, okay, well, what's that subset? And can the market sustain the number of people that want to do that?
But who decides that too? I think is the other thing as well, right?
I think
is it a team thing? Is it a player thing? Is it the developer, right? Because that's also the other unique part about all this, right? Like the NFL is not a video game, right? A video game is a video game, and there's a group who made the video game. It's kind of like WWE didn't create wrestling, right? Mm-hmm. Like they are just the biggest one right now. So I guess that for both of you guys, thoughts in regards to that. Who polices that? Like, who's watching the Watchmen?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's it all comes down to there is a league. A league could be owned by multiple parties, right? You could have it owned by the developer, you could have it owned by the teams, you could have it owned by the players, whatever kind of makes sense. And how this market moves, let's talk about a few of the most popular. You've got LCS, you have Dota, you have CSGO, there are leagues associated with each of these games. In some of these games, there's a lot of congestion. It's really hard to follow. To your point earlier, there's not simplicity. It's like, how many events are going on this weekend? Like, I'm lost.
Yeah.
So to some degree, yeah, having like a big league or a couple leagues, that makes sense because it's just good for the viewing experience. It makes the sport survive. to some degree. So it's figuring out within each of those leagues that does become popular, how is it structured, and then the people that are involved in that, yes, they should all have a say. They should all be part of the discussion. Players and owners and developers and tournament organizers and whomever it is needs to come together. That means there needs to be a lot of leadership. There needs to be a lot of expertise with the regards to the formation of leagues, and those folks are being involved. They're in the industry right now, and they're figuring it out. So, yes, I think everyone is the answer. But
Everyone.
Yeah, exactly.
That's a good one, though.
If we were talking money in esports 5 years ago, we'd probably spend a significant portion of our time talking about prize pools. We'd probably say things like, "Oh my God, did you hear NASL is having $100,000 for a StarCraft tournament?" You laugh right now, but think of how far we've
true.
come in 5 years.
Absolutely.
We just had an $18 million international. We just went to an event in New York that had a $250,000 prize pool for Dota at ESL 1. We talked to a team that were like, "We didn't even practice for this, to be honest." For a $250,000 event. And I know you were thinking about this think from 7 or 8 years ago. Are we at prize pool saturation now? Does it even matter? Is there just an expectation that you should pay out enough, but more needs to be talked about, like player salaries, the organizations you guys are setting up, things like that?
Yeah, and I know
Does it matter?
this is meant to be more of a business and prize pool question, but with the smile on our faces, I really want to just take a step back for people that are still watching us guys with the ties and suits, and remember, like, what we are doing and what we are witnessing, what we're all a part of. We're a part of the dawn of a new sport.
Yeah.
We're part of a dawn of a new digital sport for a new digital world. This sport is going to be larger than any sport, I believe, even more than football/soccer is around the world, because it's got such aspirational qualities to it, where you don't have to be 6'7" and 220 to play in the NFL. You don't have to have a jump shot like Kobe Bryant. It's like any kid who can sit and play either a console or a computer can dream about what we're doing. And I think the power behind that is going to just propel this thing to be a juggernaut, where years from now we're going to look at these prize pools and could be like, can you believe 18 million seem like a big deal?
Yeah.
It's like we got gamers making over $18 million a year now.
Yeah.
And like we thought that was such a big deal. So I mean, prize pools have always kind of been a subject of conversation, and it's great to see them going up. I love to see winners make a lot of money. Even if they're not mine, I respect it. But I mean, just stepping back from the dollar signs and from the money, man, this is a hell of a lot of fun, this business. I mean, it really is. We get to play video games and watch the birth of a new sport. I mean, it's a great place to spend some time.
I mean, think about this, right? Kevin, you said 5 years ago question. 5 years ago, would we be sitting on a table with a discussion, sponsored by Coca-Cola, of all things, right? Not to be the sponsor name drop, but just really, it's the truth, man, right? This guy, it's the truth. The other day, it's funny because even in console, right, which has been slowly growing, but not at obviously the pace that Counter-Strike, Dota, right? There was a tournament that just passed, had a 10K prize pool. $10,000, right? That's like the norm / too low now, right? I remember when I was organizing events and it was 100% payout. So it was like you paid $100 for your team pass, and we put $100 into the prize pool, and that was good enough. And we had 32 teams. We had like 64 teams show up for those things. I mean, and I think it's just absurd, like how crazy it's gotten, like really in a blink of an eye.
Yeah, I mean, the fact that League just finished up, and yes, it was what, a $2.5 million prize pool, something like that.
I also like that they don't advertise it like that.
But they don't.
Too.
They don't even care. $1 million goes to first place, but you don't hear about it. You don't hear a word about it because it's the prestige of winning the event.
Yeah.
It's really a sports-minded focus, in my opinion. So
Yeah. Are we getting to that point now where
I think so.
But here's the thing, though, right? When you think about the international, do you think that winning the international now is more important than the money, or is the money still the most important thing?
I think the money's important in the big picture, just from the PR it gets the industry. I mean, CNN, Bloomberg, all these companies, they snag on to that 18 million, and that gets us all publicity and just raises awareness of the industry. I mean, obviously, EG that won, what, $6-point-something million, they'd probably argue with me, but I don't think it's necessarily about the money. We have to make those trophies the coveted thing. We have to make being a champion the coveted thing, and then you become a truly competitive activity. Call it a sport, call it an esport, whatever you want to call it. You got to want to win, and you got to want to win to be a winner, not just for a few bucks.
Yeah. So now I just want to talk to you guys as esports fans now. So taking money out of it, what do you think is next for esports? Not in terms of the business, I'm talking in terms of games. Like, what are you looking forward to? What can't you stop playing right now? What do you think is the next big esport? Bold predictions.
I've only played it a little bit, so I want to play it more, but I didn't get the beta code. So
I knew you were going to say that.
you want some salt? Would you like some salt? I know, I'm pretty salty.
The old Overwatch, so
I'm in, by the way. It's really fun.
Oh, great, thanks.
may or may
I think we're all thinking the same title when you ask the question. It's like, I should have gone first, so we had to think of something else.
You know
I've
what?
been playing like 5 or 6 hours a day. It's bad. Like, I've been
FYI,
playing it
Overwatch is an
nonstop.
addiction.
Yeah,
It's good that you guys aren't in because
It allows you to focus on your business.
I think what would be really fun, I would love to spitball games to you guys and like kind of, say yes or no, right? Or maybe.
All right,
right?
let's do this.
What do you
All
think?
right, let's do a
in on this,
little
too.
game.
Okay,
Let's
all
do
right.
games.
All right, I like this. We've never done this before, so I
we
think this
go.
will be pretty fun. I'll start first. Rocket League.
No.
Are we both answering?
Yeah, everyone at the same time, whatever.
Yeah,
No.
no.
No? Okay.
I think that it's really fun. I think the developer has the right mind behind it in terms of like continuing to expand the competitive side. They're listening to their fans. They're doing well. It's still a flash in the pan.
I think it will be.
Really?
I think so. I think it's so simple and so easy to get into and so complex in its skill that it could indeed be viewed as such. But
I will say that I will not mind if it comes an esport just because of the way the developer is supporting that scene.
Oh, yeah.
Okay.
I think it's a fantastic game,
Yeah.
and it's a lot of fun to watch. I don't
Yeah.
know that it has long-term legs, but I understand what you said, where the actual game is pretty complex underneath it, but on the surface, I guess we'll see.
Okay. All right. Should I keep going?
Yeah, what you got next? Come on.
All right, cool. Let's see here. Battleborn.
So, any of the console FPS shooters that are coming out right now are a very weird place to me. Now, you have way more expertise on this, and I'm completely talking out of my ass.
Go ahead.
When I say this,
People like it.
when I say this, but like outside of the core games that just appeal to millions and millions of console fans, I just don't see a game like that making a swap if it's not on PC. So
Interesting.
yeah.
Okay.
I think that the reason that Call of Duty and Halo have worked is because Call of Duty and Halo had millions and millions and millions and millions of fans at a time that wasn't necessarily seen even in the PC space at that time. 2001, 2002, they had huge amounts of support. They continued to grow that, and it happened kind of organically. I don't think that is going to happen again with a new upstart console shooter. So.
Interesting. What about you guys?
Well, I haven't ever played the game, so that is I think a core part is the actual gameplay. And can it be a spectator sport? Is it hard to watch? Do you not understand what's going on? You can only understand the competitiveness when you play, and then it's the fan base and how's it distributed. So I really don't know enough to
Fair
answer.
point. Fair point.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, I'm right here with Steve. We're brought on to be the experts, and my answer is I don't know. But I
Okay,
agree with what
so-
Kevin said. It's pretty full in the FPS genre right now. I mean, with Activision bringing out the big Call of Duty League, Halo's, got their HCS going on.
And we all
I just
said-
don't. I don't know if there's another room for a console FPS.
And we all
but I haven't
All right.
played it, so I don't know.
And we all said that we liked Overwatch, but like, can people cool it with hero shooters for a little while? Like, can we just pull back?
Hey, the original hero shooter was TF2, man.
That's right. I've had people like seriously talk to me, and they're like, "No, mark my words, and I'm making it happen. That is the next big esport." I'm like, "Good luck, dude."
All right. So this one is one that I currently cast, and I'm a huge fan of. Gears of War.
So this one has a better potential than Battleborn or any of the other console shooters that are coming out, in my opinion, because it already has a built-in fan base that had millions of fans way back in the day. It already has had previous esports. I wouldn't call it success necessarily, but it did have a good scene for a while. It had a dedicated scene of very hardcore fans. And with the fact that Microsoft seems to just be in this, like, we're just going to HD remake all the games right now and release them as big collector sets, it has a potential. I think maybe. I doubt it. I would like to see it guiltily. Like I said, you're talking big old assassination player here from
That's
Gears
right,
of War
you're a
1 days.
fan.
But I would say no if I had to take a guess, but I'll keep my fingers crossed for that one.
You guys?
Yeah, I'd echo the same exact thing. I mean, I hope so. I played a lot of Gears of War, but we'll see. Microsoft is a big component in that, and their position in the space right now. So we'll see.
Yeah, I wouldn't expect it to be a top esport, but it can definitely have a solid fan base to be a solid game moving forward.
Okay, so I guess talking about a game that did have a smidge of a competitive community, but the developer seems to be very dedicated now. Rainbow Six, which can be played on either PC or console, either or.
The reason that I'm sorry, I'm jumping in first on all the console shooters.
This guy, what a
yeah, I know.
ass talk with Kevin Naki.
Okay, and here's where thanks, appreciate it. Here's where I did play Ghost Recon for a long time actually.
Okay.
I played it at a not very high competitive level, but I was okay. They've tried. And like, I don't see this time around what's different in the mix that's necessarily going to change their futures for them. The game was always fun, but I think that it was better. Here's where I'll really draw flack from the console crowd. I think it was better suited towards a keyboard and mouse. I really do. I think that Call of Duty, Halo, Destiny, I think those play fine on a controller. I think they're enjoyable. They're different games than PC FPS games. Ghost Recon, the Tom Clancy games had so much going on that I just always felt like I was limited mechanically by the controller, and so I just wish that the PC scene would develop around it. I don't think it has success on console.
Rainbow Six Siege, gentlemen?
I'm not sure.
I played part of the beta, and I want to, big asterisk. It was pretty early in the beta, but nah.
Okay, so this is going to be one I personally believe in.
Okay.
And I think that this could be potentially the future.
I like it.
Vainglory?
Vainglory.
Yeah.
Okay, all right. I actually have a lot to say about Vainglory. Okay, so because I actually just came working, before the shop, I came from a mobile game developer, and we were creating MOBAs for the mobile space. Vainglory is weird to me because it's a game that was pushed by Apple 700,000 times. Like literally on the main stage during product launches, they were like, this is the new iPhone, and this is Vainglory. And it still didn't sell. It still didn't have that big of a community. It is starting to pick up steam. I appreciate what the developer is doing. I love the fact that they're trying to support their esports scene. I think they're trying too hard, and I think they're making a lot of mistakes that other developers have, cough, cough, shoot mania, cough, where you, hey, Resident Shoot Mania caster right there.
You had to go there.
Where you can't announce to the world that your game's going to be an esport. You just can't do it unless you have an established fan base beforehand. So what they should be doing is saying, we want to make this game competitive. We want to make it competitive friendly. They should not be forcing a huge world championship down the throats of everyone when the appetite isn't there for it. Let it grow organically, support the competitive scene, find out what they want from the players themselves, and then start to level it up over time. I think that's how you become successful. I don't see Vainglory making it though.
Okay.
I'm big on Vainglory. I think I was kind of apprehensive to the whole idea of a competitive game and the level of skill required to play on your phone or tablet. And that seems weird because a lot of people will say that about sports and guys that play on the PC, right? Absolutely. I find myself like, there's always levels.
But you just, I love it.
Yeah, but I mean, I ended up playing the game for like 2 days straight, and I was like, "This is a damn good game."
Yeah.
And
it's beautiful.
I'm addicted to the game. I play it
Yeah.
regularly, so that's why I want
it's a beautiful game. And then I watched some of the OGN stuff, and I actually enjoyed watching the game too. So I'm thumbs up on Vainglory. Yeah.
Okay, so finally got you to thumbs up. Something. I feel good about it. The segment was a success. So we're doing it again. All right, go ahead.
I've never played it, but on a bigger note, I find that if I could say this at this hour, now I'm getting tired. The proliferation of mobile games to be quite interesting, and I think on some level there are going to be breakout games.
Yes.
And there are going to be developers who take that app and just take it, and it's going to have millions and millions of players. I don't know whether that'll be Vainglory, but I've heard a lot of really good things about it.
And I believe we're moving towards a one world or a one device world eventually anyway. So we've already seen the new Windows phones that actually have like full built-in like Windows 10 on them and stuff like that. We're all going to be at the spot where our PC is going to be our phone, is going to be our mobile device. So this is all, but I do agree with you. In the short term, there is going to be a breakout hit on mobile. It might be Vainglory. It might very well. I think it has a better chance than other games do right now. I don't see it making the leap. But it is going to happen. Almost happened with Clash of Clans, and that was not set up in any way, shape, or form to be able to accomplish that.
Yeah.
So,
And I guess the last one, because we can end on this one, is Overwatch.
do we think Overwatch will be an esport?
I would like to chime in and say, so obviously it goes without saying that Blizzard will more than likely, they already have spectator mode in it, right? So the core things are already there, and the beta, which is kind of crazy, because a lot of devs still don't do that. But One thing I want to give a shout out to a former IPL alumni, Ash Joshi, who I think you're familiar with.
Yeah.
So he actually did a cast, like one of the first casts of Overwatch. And one of the things that I immediately noticed was, and here's the thing, I am a Counter-Strike spectator. I like playing the game, but I like watching it more than I like playing it, which is crazy to think about in this day of age. Counter-Strike is a great game, but I just really love watching it. Overwatch, as much as I love the game, I want to know like how the appropriate way of spectating that game would be, because I don't think like a Overwatch. I don't think a overhead camera is the way to go. And I kind of want to get your thoughts on that.
There's a lot
because
going
I think
on.
there's a lot of complexity.
And you know,
there's a lot of good
TF2
things.
had that same issue.
It absolutely
TF2
does.
had that
Yes.
same issue where
Yeah.
it's so easy for the cameraman to miss his clutch heel or something because there's just so much going on and so many different abilities being used professionally at different levels. That's going to be the challenge for Blizzard. Is we have a great game. You know, there's a lot of people interested. We have experience in esports, but how can we translate the excitement inside the game onto the stream? And that could be difficult.
Yeah, and I think Blizzard, if I had to guess what their approach is going to be, they're going to say community first. So let's build a massive community. I mean, they've already, 7 million beta codes
Something
requests
like
or something
that, yeah.
absurd. You know, like, they're going to create an amazing community, and they may do that for a little while, and then I think they'll start to back it with esports. But you might see tournament organizers pick it up and third parties and start running events. But I agree, it's going to be tough to find out.
Yeah. Well,
How
because
you
now
spectate
because now we have the habit for most content creators. Like, I just find this hilarious, and I love the people that do this. But like every time a game is announced, literally 5 minutes later, there's 3 YouTube channels, 2 community podcasts already set up, and they're like already talking about the game. They're like, nope, we're the experts, and I'm gonna be an Overwatch caster. And you're like,
Yeah, I mean, I'm not gonna lie. Like,
luck, you know?
I am a commentator,
Yes.
and when I saw Overwatch, at first I was a little apprehensive, and then as time went on, I just reached out to my friends at Blizzard, and I was like, "Hey, yo, I'm gonna be the best Overwatch caster in the game. You might as well just hire me right now because you need the flavor." You know
it was
what
so
I mean?
funny. Like literally 3 weeks ago, before the game was in the hands of anyone in the public, I already saw like, and we're going to start our blah 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 Overwatch podcast this week, and I was like, stop, please,
Yeah.
don't.
Everyone wants to be
I
the
also
first
think that's,
one.
Everyone wants to be the
but
big
I
one
think
for it.
that's
Yeah.
the to kind of bring it back to the aspiration. That's what that is, right? That's just people that are just super energized about this new product that
Yeah.
isn't even fully out yet. I mean, no one has any idea how Blizzard's even going to monetize it. If I had to guess, it's going to be the Dota model. But I think that, I think it's 100% going to be the Dota model. There's no way in hell
reasonable.
they're going to ask people to buy heroes in the game when you need every hero, literally, because of the switching. And on top of which, asking people to spend $20 or $30 or however much money on the game is just absurd in this day and age, especially for PC. That's my personal belief.
Okay, so if we're
I feel like we're just this is the greatest roundtable ever.
If we're going to talk about this for 2 seconds real quick before we do close,
We're going to go get a Coke. You guys can keep talking. No, I'm just kidding.
I don't know about that. So like people have shown that they're willing to just dump enormous amounts of money into games right now, just head over heels. They don't. I remember, was it 5-6 years ago when Skyrim came out, and they're like horse armor, and everyone was like, LOL, that's a skin for a horse. And now you're lucky if you get that in your games nowadays. You know, so I could see a world where they charge your heroes, give you like 3 out of the gate or something like that, and then tell you to buy them over time. I don't know. I have no insight into that, but
I don't think they're going to be charging for heroes. I wouldn't be surprised to see them charge less than your typical $60 game, maybe coming in at $20 or $30, and then you're going to move on to skins and all kinds of, maybe even the goofy hats. I mean, the things that move digital in-game sales can amount to way more than you would have made if you charged $60 for the game to begin with. A Dota model or a League model integrated a little bit in there. That's what I would anticipate from Blizzard.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Awesome. All right. Well, guys,
That was fun.
I think that is actually going to wrap it up for us this week. Thank you very much, Stephen,
Thank you.
Jason, for joining us, though. We
Yeah,
really
thanks for
appreciate it. Guys, next week we are going to be talking about Counter-Strike Global Offensive, a scene that has been rapidly expanding recently. We're going to have Sir Scoot Smith in to join us.
Oh, God.
Yeah.
Why?
Oh, yeah. Wow. Shots fired.
I hope I'm here next
From
week
Golden
just
Boy,
so I
baby.
can.
Anyway, guys, thank you very much for tuning in. We certainly hope you enjoyed the show. We'll be back with more Esports Weekly next Friday at 7 p.m. Eastern. Have a great week.